Hey there, Blip here, and today for you guys I have a video on the new patch coming up, patch 9.1, which is going to be most likely announced at Blizzcon, which is in a couple of days, so that's very exciting. Yeah, no one really knows what's going to hit in patch 9.1, but there are a few things we know, and this video is just going to go over all of the things I think is going to be added in patch 9.1 and just kind of get you guys excited for what I think is going to be in a very exciting patch. Now obviously there's going to be stuff we already know about added, stuff like the new raid, the new seasonal fix and whatnot. Not going to be talking about that sort of stuff because it's stuff we know is coming. But I think something interesting talking about that is what raid do you think we'll get, where do you think it'll be located? Well, obviously we know we're going to get a raid against the jailer at some point in the future, so we could have that this patch, a patch in the Maw. Blizzard likes to push their narrative quite fast, as we had in BFA, where, you know, we were fighting over Azeroth and then all of a sudden we're fighting in Zoth in one expansion. Same with Legion, we were just, you know, fighting on the Broken Isles and whatnot, and then all of a sudden we're in Argus all of a sudden in one patch. So Blizzard likes to push their narrative very fast when it comes to releasing new content. So with a new patch, you could see us going straight into the Maw and defeating the jailer in the next patch, and then something big happening. And, you know, just stuff like that in general is expected to happen. So it could most likely be the Maw, but we could also get a raid before then, and then the raid after is definitely going to be the Maw. But don't quote me on that. Okay, now let's talk about the stuff I'm more than certain is going to come into the game in the next patch. So first of all, new legendaries. I mean, that's obvious, right? If you think of the legendary system, it's very similar to the one we have in Legion, where they obviously took the Legion system, took the things that people didn't like about it and put this new crafting system together to make these legendaries. And also these legendaries are copying a lot of the Legion ones and tier sets and whatnot anyway. So it's very, you know, expectable for us to be receiving legendaries in the next patch. Whether we'll get a load or not many, I'm not too sure. I probably reckon you'll see at least one new legendary for every class, and then ideally we will see one for each spec as well, but who knows? We don't know where Blizzard is on their timeline right now, because obviously they were pretty behind for the Shadowlands release, which is why we had all this stuff a bit late. So whether they were able to catch up and able to implement new and cool legendary effects and whatnot, because I think the legendaries we had for the start of the expansion in general were pretty boring, I'm not gonna lie. Let's just hope we see some cool stuff in there, maybe like the legendary rings from Legion, where you could, you know, get a random talent in a row. That was pretty cool. Hopefully we see something like that. If not, just some cool new legendaries would be awesome. But we most likely will for sure see some new legendaries. I don't have any doubt about that. Legendary tuning. Now legendary tuning is most certainly going to happen in this patch, because when patch 9.1 hits, everything is going to be reset. And what I mean by that is that the value of your soul lash is going to go down a lot. Think of it like Azerite Resident, right? Or Titan Resident that you had in BFA, which you could use to buy Azerite gear for a currency. Every patch they would reset this currency somehow. Early on they just simply made it so that you wouldn't get your currency reset, but the value to buy a mythic item would just go up by that much. But you'd also gain residence at an increased rate once the patch hit. This way your resource farm before wasn't wasted, but at the same time it was really unlikely you were going to be able to buy one of those mythic pieces in the first week. And then later on they just simply made it so that your residence was turned into gold, so they could just not do that and they could just keep it the same. Now if you look at Soul Lash has a cap at the moment at 8,000, so most likely I would guess by the increments you'll probably be able to craft a new legendary at the higher item level tier for around 6k Soul Lash, maybe 5k, and then they'll obviously make it so you're going to get Soul Lash at an increased rate, maybe increase the cap, or they just add new floors to Torghast, which will add more, you know, Soul Lash in there so you can just get more. Either way, why this is a good thing, as I was saying, is because it means that when they do legendary tuning, it's not going to feel as bad for you, right? Because simply, if they nerf your legendary and then the patch hits, you're going to have more than enough Soul Lash to just craft a new legendary at the new item level to, you know, so, you know, that means you'll have your new best legendary. Or you can just upgrade your previous legendary, for example, up to one higher. But basically what it means is that, you know, them nerfing your legendary isn't going to be as big of a deal, because you're going to have a lot more Soul Lash, which is going to give them the perfect opportunity to just balance out all the legendaries. I would like to see some of the boring legendaries completely reworked, if I'm being completely honest with you. I don't like playing with, for example, as a fire mage we play with Feathered Incantation, which is just giving us some more damage on consecutive crits, which you don't think about, you just play with it. So we essentially don't have a legendary, we just have a damage buff. And that is completely defeating the purpose of legendaries in my opinion. So hopefully we see a complete rework or just complete nerf into the ground on that legendary so we can play some more interesting ones, but there aren't really that many to work with anyway. Some more legendaries, legendary tuning, these are things that I definitely think are going to be happening in patch 9.1. Now, Torghast is obviously a big pillar of Shadowlands. Blizzard have said that multiple times. So expect to see new anima powers for the Torghast tower for each class. Now I'm hoping they don't do what they did for the start of Torghast and they go spec specific when it comes to new anima powers. Because the one thing I think is really boring about Torghast is it's the same for every spec. Sure, there are a few different things that can happen with different specs, but for example, I'm going to use mages as a reference because that's what I play most of the time. You're normally playing the same stuff, and even if you swap between specs, you know, you have more flame strike damage or more arcane explosion damage, and it's not really changing things up that much. And I would really love to see some spec specific anima powers. I really hope Blizzard does this, but even if they don't, expect new anima powers in Torghast. Yeah, let me know in the comments, what do you think? Would you like to see more spec specific anima powers? I think it would add a lot more diversity. And also would like to see more than just a more rat build, more stuff that interacts with the environment. They have a lot of potential with Torghast, so I'm really hoping they go all in on that and they improve the experience. Now with patch 9.0.5, which has been announced fairly recently, obviously there's a lot of changes coming already, some Covenant buffs here and there, and also they already said that you're not going to be getting, the Stygia you get from the Maw is not going to count into patch 9.1, so you're not going to be able to like stock up Stygia and whatnot, which is also a good indication of them intending to add new stuff to the Maw. I reckon they're going to keep Binari around so you can get your sockets in your gear, but I think they're going to add like a new area in the Maw, like, you know, you have the Beast Warrens. I reckon like another area the size of the Beast Warrens. I could really expect them adding something like that to the Maw, because yeah, I think they're going to do a lot of work on the Maw and just keep adding to it. They want it to have that Mechagon like feel. I feel like the Maw still needs a lot of work to be an enjoyable place to go, because right now it's just a really arbitrary grind that is really frustrating to do, but it's kind of essential for getting that extra bit of DPS for your class. So yeah, expect to see a lot of more updates and additions. I would like to see a lot of that stuff actually, just to try and make them more fresh and interesting. And tier sets. It's been confirmed by Blizzard that tier sets are being added back into the game, which is amazing, because tier sets honestly is what freshens up your classes and your specs tier to tier, because you get to try new builds and cool and interesting things. So seeing the return of tier sets is amazing, but Blizzard hasn't really told us what their plans are with tier sets yet, and Ian in a few interviews has talked a lot about how they don't like having like 4 or 5 items that are locked with tier sets, and then obviously there's a problem of PvP players and PV Mythic Plus players not enjoying the fact that all their best gear comes from the raid because the tier sets are there. I personally think all the good stuff should come from the raid, because it's the hardest type of content to put, like, you know, you have to have a dedicated team of individuals, you know, committing to basically a work schedule to clear the thing. But that's my personal opinion. Either way, tier sets are being added back into the game. Let's just hope they are good tier sets though. The stuff we had in Legion and beyond then. Not tier like set bonuses like they said they would include in BFA, where they added tier set bonuses like the ones from, you know, Battle of Dazora Law, where you just had to get a ring and a cape, which everyone could get, and it gave you 150 intellect from having them. Like that is not a tier set, and I do not want to see anything like that, because it's just boring. It's just so awful. Let's just pray we see good tier sets. I'm assuming because they announced tier sets, they know there will be a lot of backlash if they didn't have them similar-ish to the ones we had before. So expect to see the good tier sets back, not the, you know, Battle of Dazara Law. You have your ring and your cape equipped for 150 intellect in the raid. Yeah, no, we don't want to see any of that. And then another thing I think you can expect to see is obviously your Covenant campaign is going to continue onwards. I expect that you will see new Soulbind, a completely new Soulbind, so you'll have 4 different choices. I think they'll only add 1, because adding more than that might be a bit too much for their balancing team, because obviously we're going to have tier sets, new legendaries, and the legendaries are going to be tuned, and the Covenant changes. There's just going to be a lot of variables at play here, and the Blizzard team really shouldn't have too much pressure when it comes to balancing, I think. So yeah, expect at the maximum 1 new soulbind. If they don't add a new soulbind, I think they will extend or add on to the existing soulbinds we have, because otherwise there's not really anything interesting to unlock. Obviously, when Blizzard designed Shadowlands, everything was intended to be in place from the start, and then they could build upon it instead of adding like Azerite essences into the game midway through BFA as an emergency fix. They have this current system they can just build upon. So expect to see a new soulbind added for more, so you can get something from your renown farming, or expect to see all of the soulbinds kind of, you know, extended and built upon. Because otherwise just farming renown in the next patch is going to be arbitrary and not really do anything power related, which I think Blizzard wants to have that bit of power behind it. Okay, so now onto some more speculative things. These are things that I think are going to potentially arrive, but I could definitely see Blizzard either overlooking them or just not adding them at all. So, new conduits. I think new conduits are really, really important. Or they need to remove conduits entirely. Conduits, in my opinion, are like what Azerite traits were in BFA. You know, they're choices you can make to gain a bit of DPS, but there's not many of them. When you think of how many there are actually in the game, there is an absolute truckload of them, because every single spec has 4 different conduits related to their spec, which obviously if you multiply that by the number of classes, that is a lot of things they have to make. So as a result of that, as you could probably tell, most of the conduits are kind of boring. For example, Frost Mage has one that increases their Ice Lance damage or their Blizzard damage. Okay, well, these aren't really interesting choices, and they're things that are going to be essential for one type of content and useless for another, which is a big problem in my eyes. And I think in general, conduits are pretty negligible to a lot of players. I don't think a lot of players really care about conduits that much. Obviously you want to get your best conduits and slot them in, and then you forget about them. And I'm worried that they will do the same treatment with conduits that they did with Azerite armor. And I think Azerite armor towards the end of BFA became quite good, but as soon as patch 9.1 hit, sorry 8.1, they did a massive like addition to Azerite gear, and then they abandoned it. I think the system was starting to get a lot better. I think the thing that Azerite armor really missed was a lot more diverse options and choices, and unfortunately Blizzard just completely gave up on that, and we didn't see anything for 2 patches with Azerite armor. It was just completely abandoned, and then they copy pasted it and just, yeah, they left it. Whereas I think if they continued iterating on it and they just added a, you know, truckload of more stuff that could be interesting and fun for the choices you have, then it could have been a much more interesting system. I'm scared that with conduits, as I said, they're going to do the Azerite treatment where they're just going to abandon it. They're going to see that, you know, this is either going to be a lot of work, or it's just there's not really much point changing it, and then we're just not going to get anything new and interesting. So I could see them not adding new conduits, but I could see them adding new conduits as well. Hopefully they add new conduits, hopefully they're interesting. The problem with conduits is that you're kind of battling with legendaries, right? In a sense they're kind of similar, but conduits, from the like point that Blizzard has started making them, they're more of just passive damage increases to make you excel at Mythic Plus or PvP or raiding, which is really, you know, kind of like why. So yeah, conduits are very similar to legendaries in a sense, but also not. Either way, I'm going a bit of too much of a rant here, so I can make another video on that if you guys are interested. Let me know, because I love talking about conduits and stuff like that. It's very interesting to talk about. Yeah, let's just hope they add more conduits to the game, and I'm ideally hoping for 2 more per spec with more diverse choices instead of just AoE damage increase, single target damage increase. Yeah, you know, like more cool choices would be nice. And then here's a change I think is really, really needed, but I don't think Blizzard is going to do it unless it gets a lot of traction. And that is that potency conduits are currently only obtainable from Mythic Plus, and a bit from PvP, and a bit from World Quest and whatnot, which is fine, but the higher item level ones are all from Mythic Plus, and even then, the highest you can get is 200 item level, and then they want you to go through the horrible experience of farming Stygia in the first place, which is just a boring and horrible experience, and then having to gamble every week by doing a completely horrible thing where you have to fly back to your sanctum and put the item in, and then fly all the way back to Venari and get the item, and then rinse and repeat and keep gambling and upgrading your conduits. It's just, first of all, it's just horribly designed, and second of all, why can't you get good potencies from either raiding, or if you want it to be from Mythic Plus, that's fine, but why can't we get the max item level conduits from Mythic Plus? It just doesn't make any sense. I think that's something they might have just forgot to tick when they made, you know, the Shadowlands in general. I really hope this is something they address, because you should be able to get the max item level conduits from Mythic Plus. You shouldn't have to go through all this Stygia, you know, bullshit to actually get your BIS conduits. I absolutely hate that. That is the worst thing, and if this change was to happen, I think that's like the most excited thing I'd be looking forward to. So I don't have to farm weeks after weeks of Stygia just to gamble on, you know, these stupid upgrades. Also, I think another speculative thing, so if you've been watching the recent like patch notes, there's been a lot of people talking about the new Valor upgrading system. There is no Valor vendor. If they add a Valor vendor, then I could see them putting 226 conduits into that, or, you know, the mythic level appropriate, which would be nice. But again, we haven't heard anything about it. I think Blizzard is really scared of doing that, because then it makes a kind of system where you're going to get way too much gear from Mythic Plus PvP and raiding. So they're really skeptical to add the vendor. I think they should add the vendor and just maybe reduce the amount of stuff you get, like Valor and Conquest. Or just add the, you know, Valor point upgrading plus the Valor vendor, but just make the Valor upgrades more expensive. So you're still inclined to get, you know, the gear from Mythic Plus itself and upgrade it. And then if you just, you know, if you really don't want to do that, you can just spend your Valor on the item itself, which will cost a bit more than upgrading it, but it gets you the item. I think something like that would just be nice. It would help the Mythic Plus community out a lot, which I think they need a lot of love. I think Mythic Plus is by far the most shafted content in the game right now, and it needs a lot of love. And for the last section of this video, because I don't want it to be insanely long, the one thing that I don't think they will do, but I think is like so essential, but they always wait until the end of an expansion, is class quality of life buffs. Now, some classes are fine. I think Blizzard, you know, has really kicked it into gear when people were a bit worried about certain classes and the love they needed, and they did go, you know, improve upon a lot of classes, which is, you know, kudos to them. That was really nice. But some classes they just for some reason overlook. Frost Mage is a good example of that. Frost Mage has so many problems, which it's had for so many expansions, and there are so many easy fixes to it. I'm definitely going to make a video on that, I think, because I feel like, you know, this is something that's just been overlooked a lot. And they're really simple fixes, and I feel like Blizzard should really look into classes a bit more between the patches, instead of waiting until the end of an expansion to make, you know, major improvements to the quality of life of specs. So yeah, I would love to see, you know, some fix-ups on some of the classes in the game right now, but I think that is very unlikely, and you probably won't see anything like that. Otherwise then, the only real thing now we need to know is that Blizzcon is happening in, I believe, like 5-ish, 6-ish days from now, so check your calendar from the day to day and whatnot. I definitely think they're going to announce patch 9.1 and patch 9.2. How much detail they'll go into 9.2, I don't think they'll go into too much, because they haven't, you know, haven't said anything about patch 9.1. So that's where all their focus is going to be, and then it's going to be on a bit of patch 9.2, like they did for Legion, where they hinted at Argus and whatnot, or Tumus Sargeras. Yeah, thanks for sticking with me. I know this was a long video. I hope you were pretty excited about patch 9.1. I think there's a lot of cool stuff they could add in patch 9.1 that I haven't mentioned here, but it's stuff that I couldn't guess, right? There is a lot of stuff they could add that I just cannot guess, because, you know, Blizzard are designing the game and they could add any type of content they wanted. I only can go off of what we've seen in the past and what we kind of can expect, and that's why I came up with this video. I thought it'd be cool to speculate on some things and kind of give you an idea of what to expect in patch 9.1. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed making it. I love talking about stuff like this. And yeah, if you want to help support the channel, then be sure to check the description, and you can look for the YouTube memberships or the Patreon, and that would really help me out a lot. I cannot thank my current patrons and YouTube members enough. You guys are really making my year, and yeah, thank you so much for that. And I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you in the next video.